Welcome to the Jess Larsen Show on innovation and leadership. On this episode, I'm excited to have a new friend of mine, Dean Stott. He's a very accomplished individual. We're going to talk about his time in a Tier 1 Special Operations Unit for the British military. He's an author. He's got a couple of world records. He's in investing. And special to my heart, he and his wife are doing incredible work in countering child sex trafficking. Dean, thank you for making time to be on here.
Thank you for having me, Jess. Appreciate it.
Let's start with special ops for people who aren't familiar with SBS and thinking about, a lot of people are aware that, the Americans Delta Force is Charlie Beckwith, who come over and spent time with your Special Air Service 22 Regiment guys and realized Americans didn't have that capability and had to fight for years to get the Americans to want one, but finally did. For people not as familiar with SBS, can you explain what the Special Boat Service is, how it's similar or different than regular SEALs versus SEAL Team 6 and DevGru guys?
Yeah, so the best way, I think a lot of people don't realize that Special Forces is tiered. So you have Tier 2 Special Forces, which, as you touched on, is your SEALs, your Rangers, your Green Berets. And then here in the US, your Tier 1 Special Forces is your Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, which means they've then gone and done an additional selection process for that. So in the UK, our Tier 2 equivalent is the Royal Marines Commandos, the Army Commandos, the Airborne Units, the Parachute Regiment. And then our Tier 1 is the SAS and the SBS, Special Air Service from the Army and Special Boat Service from the Navy. But unlike here in the US, where Delta Force have their own selection process and SEAL Team 6 have theirs, the SAS and SBS is the same. We actually do it together. So that's the big difference. But obviously, one of the main differences is the selection process in itself. And as you touched on, Charlie Beckwith, I think it was born out of Munich, the Munich massacre in '72, that they needed some hostage rescue capacity. So again, a differentiator for us, SAS and SBS do hostage rescues domestic and international, whereas here that's reliant on your FBI, SWAT, HRT teams, and then obviously the military do it abroad. So that's one big differentiator. But a lot of people are like, what's the difference between Tier 2 and Tier 1? And it's actually the selection process. Go.
An analogy, I would love to hear if you feel like it's the same in the military over there. Over here, an analogy that a number of Tier 1 guys who've been on the show have liked is it's almost like if the wider military is all the athletes and special ops is like the pro athletes, then the Tier 1 is like the full-on Michael Jordan, LeBron Jameses of the pro athletes. Is that similar over there?
It's probably a Hall of Fame. Yeah, that's it. It's a process, but they're a different type of soldier. And the best way I can explain it, what probably the most famous Tier 2 unit training is buds. Everyone's seen buds. Everyone's seen them running along the beaches and they've got the boats above their heads. What Tier 2 Special Forces is doing, yes, you're testing them physically and you're testing them mentally, but what you're trying to do is build a cohesive team. Those individuals need to be working together. As soon as they work together, it becomes easier. So you're building that teamwork. Tier 1 Special Forces is you need to be self-motivated. You do it on your own a lot of the time. And so a lot of Tier 2 guys don't like it because they like to get feedback from instructors, whether good or bad, whether they're getting shouted at or not. And so ours isn't. You won't have an instructor with you running behind enemy lines. If you need to be motivated by an instructor, then it doesn't work. So our selection, the selection process is more about self-motivation because you've already proven yourself to work in teams. And then you just get put through this arduous training process. First month for us is running up and down mountains with kit on our back. Then once we've done that, then we go to the jungle for 6 weeks and we lose half the guys there as well. Then you come back, there's interrogation, parachuting, for us as well, we've been learning about new weapon systems, new communication systems. And then you have the counterterrorism, the hostage rescue stuff, all the black stuff that you see on the movies. So that's about a 6-month process. And then the SBS, you then do 3 more months. You do your diving and your boating. And so in that 9 months, we started with 200 and we finished with 8, and that's about the normal attrition rate is about 95%. So yeah, it's a totally different selection process completely. Yeah. And the guys don't look like, I call biceps, bullets and bombs. Hollywood doesn't help matters when you've got Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham. You know, everyone sees these big muscly guys. These guys aren't. These guys actually are very unassuming. You know, a lot of them will be taking up surveillance roles as well. They need to be able to blend into the environment.
Yeah. Although I think you do a pretty good Jason Statham. You got some serious biceps, I think, and you got the same haircut. So, you know, you've been on TV. There are all these different things that you've done. I kind of want to start where you started when you were on the Jocko podcast. Will you tell people about this story from the opening of your book and about being compromised in Yemen and this?
Yeah. We'll talk about that
yeah,
story.
Talk about that. Yeah, that story.
So, and it wasn't Yemen, it was Afghanistan. We put Yemen in the book. No, you're right. In the book, it says Yemen. But when you go, for us, we have the Official Secrecy Act. And so when my book got approved, they're like, this is great, but we need to change this location. I said, we'll just put it as Yemen, and we got it through. But it was actually Afghanistan. But yeah, it's a great story because everyone, you know, when you tell them your backstory and where you come from, everyone's like, what's the scariest time you've had in the special forces? And you hear some great stories, and it tends to be like, you know, maybe huge explosions, guys getting shot at, and, you know, they're cornered, you know, then someone's bringing in air support and they manage to get away, or you're diving underwater at night doing a hostage rescue and your mask gets ripped off, or you have a malfunction parachute. And there's so many things in the military that could go wrong. Whereas my story it wasn't really like that. So I used to dress up as Taliban and pick up Taliban agents. And so literally head to toe, black beard, the full works. And we would go out each day, pick these agents up for our Secret Service to then debrief. But every time we went out to Kandahar, there's no point in planning a route, because every time you went into the city, there's roadblocks, additional roadblocks would come up. So at least we knew where we were going to. And the same happened this day. We have 3 vehicles. I was the lead vehicle, and I have my Afghan Special Forces guy next to me, H. And we would drive past the target, confirm that he's there. Second vehicle would pick up the target. Third vehicle will make sure there's no follow-up. There's no, you know, any counter surveillance. And so, yeah, this same thing happened this day. Went down, there's a roadblock, got directed right down this very narrow market street. You know, there were shops either side, but it was bumper to bumper with traffic. And I had this kit, you know, my beard was dyed black, but you could put contact lenses, you can change your eyebrows, you can change your whole face, you know, to turn this into someone who looked like Taliban. And obviously it's quite an impressive kit, but I never used to like getting anything in my eyes. And so I have like piercing blue eyes, and my skin was like very dark because of the powder. And everyone started pointing at the car, and they started knocking on the window and pointing at the car. And you know that you shouldn't be there, so your senses are heightened anyway. And so I said to Hekmat, you know, my guy, I said, I think we've been compromised. He said, yeah, I think we have. And so it came across the net. They've been compromised. Once they hear that, everyone sort of goes radio silent. And inside the vehicles, we've got internal comms. You know, I have a push button on my gear stick, and as I talk normally, they can hear me back in HQ.
And it was because you didn't have your brown contacts in.
I thought it was because I didn't have my brown contacts in. You know, I thought, you know, why are they pointing at the car? Is it because my eyes, you know, because people could get close to the car? That was it. You know, before they may not have got as close. So here's me sort of self-analyzing. You know, what is it? What's compromised us? And my commander's I have an earpiece in my ear, and he's asking me questions, and, you know, I'm responding. He said, well, you know, the great thing about Tier 1 Special Forces as well is they treat you as an adult. You have that responsibility. They won't take that. They won't micromanage you. You're the guy on the ground, not them. They can't see what you can see. You can't really assess this. You can have a better assessment of the situation than they have. However it's way you can try and describe it. And he's like, you happy with the IA drill? And I was like, yeah, happy with the IA drill. The IA drill was basically underneath my seat. I had an MP5 Kurtz, a submachine gun with no barrel. It has 30 rounds of 9mm, and on automatic. And basically you put it and you just go full automatic into the windscreen, and you basically giving yourself time, a little bit of time. You grab your weapon, which is wrapped in a rag at the door, go to the back of the vehicle, and they have an RPG style weapon, and you blow up the vehicle because there's sensitive communications in there. You don't want to fall in the hands of the enemy. And so that was the IA drill. And so I'm working out the IA drill in my head, and I'm like, okay. And then what
was the weapon beside you in the door? Is this?
It's a C8 DeMarco. It's like an AR variant, a Canadian variant. It's called the C8 DeMarco. That was our weapon choice. And I'm also thinking I'm going to be in an orange boiler suit on CNN tonight. You know, all things are going on in your head, but you have to still remain calm in that situation. And he's like, right, yeah, on you. So as we're him and I are having this conversation, the traffic is slowly nudging forward. And as I go to grab my weapon and pull it up, thankfully for me, the second vehicle's just come around the corner in time and seen what's going on. And he's like, stop. And so I just dropped the weapon straight away. He said, your turban is caught in the door. And so I'd misread this whole situation. I thought these people were bad, you know, it was my contact lenses, we'd been compromised, when actually they were just being genuinely nice, just to let me know that my turban was caught in the door. But I use that as a great scenario, how you can misread a situation. You can be focused in and tunnel vision without really looking at the bigger picture. You know, thankfully for me, no one was hurt. And it's a great story because not one round was fired. But for me, as a personal experience, probably the scariest time in my life.
Yeah, crazy. So let's give people a little more background. I briefly went over. Let's talk about world records, author, TV shows. Let's cover some of the other highlights, and then I've got a bunch more questions.
Evacuations is a big one as well.
Yeah,
which probably leads into the bike ride.
Yeah. Will you give people kind of an overview on those different things?
Yeah, so we touched on my time in the military. You know, I did 16 years, and I actually had no plans on leaving the military. You know, I found a career that I loved. I was working alongside like-minded individuals. You know, I was living and breathing what the kids nowadays play Call of Duty. That was my lifestyle day in, day out. And so life was good. I just met my wife, Alana, as well. But normally when life's going good, a curveball, something will happen. And that happened to me as well. We were just about to go to Afghanistan on another deployment. And we're out in Oman doing pre-deployment training. I was doing what's called a HALO jump, high altitude, high opening. So unlike skydiving, which is HALO, you're actually still attached to the aircraft. It's a static line. You exit at 15,000 feet. The parachute will open, and then you travel up to 50 kilometers or 30 minutes in the air to the target area. And I've done a load of these jumps before on the previous deployment, and we had some new guys just pass selection. So Sergeant Major's like, go do some fun jumps. But the military is really great at ruining good sports like skiing, diving, and parachuting. You know, there's no such thing as a fun jump. And but I exited this aircraft, and I was looking the wrong way. I was actually looking up at my foot, which was caught in a line above my head. I should be looking forward. And I knew I had 2 to 3 seconds before that parachute opened, went taut. And I was frantically trying to clear my leg in time. And I couldn't. My leg got pulled over my head to the right. And thankfully, my heel did clear. But I'd never experienced pain like it. You know, I was vomiting because of the pain. I was drifting in and out of consciousness because the air was so thin. But I did have a canopy, and I did see that the team were in front of me. I managed to land it one-legged. It was a great landing, actually. It was a good landing. But, you know, damage sustained ended my career. I tore my ACL, MCL, lateral meniscus in my knee, but my hamstring, my calf, and my quadricep, all supporting muscles. So for me, I didn't have any ambitions of leaving the military, and it was almost like forced upon me, and went through this whole identity crisis. You know, what is my role within society? You know, this is my life. You know, how do I fit in? And very, very similar to what maybe professional athletes go through. You spent your career getting to the best you can be, and then maybe a life-changing tackle or injury sort of changes that direction. And so my wife's very entrepreneurial. You know, she set up my first security company on her phone in 30 minutes, you know, without sounding like Liam Neeson. When you have a particular set of skills, you end up working in the security sector. So for us in the UK as well, I know here in the US that you guys really look after your veterans, that they get an education at university. We have none of that. We got none of that. We don't get any of that. And so you are out. You know, thank you for your time. You know, that's it. And so, thankfully for me, it was May 2011, the height of the Arab Spring. Arab Spring was now across the whole of Middle East and North Africa. So my first job within 48 hours to help set up the British Embassy in Benghazi, which was a great relief for me because my wife was also 8 months pregnant. So for me, as I was leaving them camp gates, how am I going to support my family? So that was a nice bit of respite. But as I got there, I soon realized the Libyans didn't want to be in another Afghanistan in Iraq. They wanted, once Gaddafi had fallen, they wanted to take control of their country themselves. They didn't want British and American security companies walking around with guns. I mean, I was listening to, I never name and shame, but the big 5 security companies. And I was listening to them in this hotel selling crisis management and evacuation plans for 6-7-figure sums to these non-profits, these oil and gas companies, these Fortune 500 companies, which is quite dangerous. There was nothing in place. And so I said to my wife, I was trying to find a niche within the industry. And I said, I think I have an idea. There was a huge proliferation of weapons at the time. So I bought 30 weapons on the black market and I buried them. I spent a month in Libya and I buried them between Tunis and Egypt and designed my own evacuation plans. We lived in Aberdeen, which is the oil and gas capital of Europe. It's like Houston. And so we had access to oil subsidiary companies. And I just sold my evacuation plan, hopefully never needing to use it. But when I tell people I work in the security industry, because of my bald head, touched on my muscles and my tattoos, they think you're a doorman from Club Tropicana. It's such a diverse sector. You have surveillance, close protection, maritime security, cybersecurity, probably one of the only growing industries to date, and will continue to grow. But the military, when I was in the special forces, they will only show you what they want to show you, what is prevalent to that mission. Here I had opportunity to be outside those walls and working with locals, understanding the demographics, the politics, the tribal influences. I had a lot more flexibility. But each phone call I was getting was a new country. It was a new task. One phone call, could you take the UAE royal family super yacht from Barcelona to the Maldives? Amazing. Next one, I'm training the Kurdish special forces to fight ISIS. And so I was building up a really good network and really understanding about this industry. And I just finished the London Olympics with Visa. Spent 6 weeks in London, and I was in Benghazi when your American ambassador got killed, September 11th, 2012. I think they did a movie called 13 Hours on it. And this was the first time I activated the evacuation plan. A German oil company, KCA Deutag, needed help, and I went in and I single-handedly evacuated an oil company over 36 hours through safe houses back to Tripoli.
How many
because
people?
Of the success. That was eight engineers, and there's just eight German engineers on that one. Yeah, and then we had the drivers. We had drivers from Benghazi, and I had to swap the drivers out from drivers from Tripoli, because it's all about, it wasn't so much we were the risk, it was actually the drivers, because there's 167 tribes in Libya. So the actual coastal road is probably only about 10 hours from Benghazi to Tripoli. But you need to go through Sirte, Misrata, and things like that. So I needed to get somewhere safe. So we ended up going southeast of Benghazi. I had a safe house in Zella. And the German engineers were like, why aren't we going to Tripoli? I was like, because we don't even know what's going on. Because when I got them out, we still didn't know what was going on in the city. But unbeknownst to them, I had drivers coming in from Tripoli, which would make that second half of the mission success. And then because of the success of that, 2 years later, I was in Brazil doing the Soccer World Cup. And we now had the Tripoli War, civil war between the militias and the government in Libya. And I get a phone call from the Canadian embassy saying, your name keeps coming up. You're the guy to speak to. So I went in and I helped them. 18 military and 4 diplomats, single-handedly got those out as well. When I say single-handed, I'm the only Westerner. I have a couple of Libyan guys with me. And I came, since then, we ended up getting 1,200 out in Afghanistan. I was in Disneyland with my wife on October the 7th in 2023 when Hamas obviously went into Israel. My phone starts blowing up, and October the 8th, that evening, I land in Tel Aviv. But unlike the other evacuations where I had safe houses, security and infrastructure in place, I'd never been to Israel before. So I just reverse engineered the concept. And we got 220 out in 96 hours there. So between that and then also some in Sudan, we've nearly got 2,000 people out, which sounds amazing. But it's a really poor business model because I never made any money on it. But it was never for making money. It was because it was the right thing to do. But and I have to go back slightly just past the Canadian embassy, because it's like, well, where does that take you to? A bike ride to Netflix shows and things like that. And so when I did come back from the Canadian embassy, my normal SOP would launder my clothes, charge my phone, and wait for the next phone call. And my wife sat me down and put 2 bottles of red wine on the table and highlighted I'd only been home 21 days in a 365-day calendar. And, chapter 17 in my book is called Dead or Divorced. That was the conversation we were having. And I totally disconnected from society. I thought that was just a normal job, just go rescue embassies. That isn't normal. And she thought I wanted to be away because I was an adrenaline junkie, and it wasn't the case at all. I thought she wanted me to be away because we were business partners to get the business in, and she, and she misinterpreted why I wanted to be away. And so from that moment on, we realized that, I'll never leave the door unless it's cleared by 5 people. It's me, my wife, and 3 kids, and that's it. No one else will have influence on that. But she said, look, take a sabbatical and take a rest. So I took a rest, and my injured leg now was 4 pounds lighter than my good leg. So this is a 5 years since my initial injury. And I just bought a road bike off Amazon. Never cycled much since a child on a BMX. And my wife was property developing, and she said, come work with her. And we now had our second child. Tommy was born. And I'm sat in these architects and planners meetings. And you've heard a bit about my backstory. And I'm bottle feeding my son. My wife's pretty much running the whole show. And I wasn't really interested in the heating system or the plumbing system, And she looked over and she could see that I just had a distant glaze. And she said, you need to do something to keep yourself physically and mentally engaged. And it was about a month before my 40th birthday. So I was having a midlife crisis. I was thinking about legacy and, what was I going to leave on this earth? And I said, I always fancied doing a world record. I always remember as a young child being fascinated with the Guinness Book of Records, very intrigued about how many Ferrero Rochers you could eat in a minute, or, walking around Australia backwards, all these things. So I said, I fancy a world record. And she said, what in? I said, well, cycling seems to be good. It's not hurting my knee. And so I was thinking maybe east-west coast of Scotland. My wife had another plan. She found the world's longest road. It goes from southern Argentina to northern Alaska. It's 14,000 miles, 14 countries, 2 continents. So having only cycled 20 miles, I applied for the world record, and Guinness came back and said, yes, you've been successful. During that 5-year period as well, me and my wife work a lot in the philanthropic space. As you touched on, she's a huge ambassador in the human trafficking space. She's a mover and shaker there, and has been for 25 years. She actually got awarded the MBE from the King 2 years ago for her services to vulnerable women. So that was one of her passions. And for me, being a veteran, veterans was one of my causes as well. So
can you back up just for all my non-UK listeners? Can you talk about how that's like getting knighted, like this process, like what an MBE is?
Yeah, an MBE, it's similar to being knighted. An MBE means you're a member of the most excellent order of the British Empire. So you've been recognized for your services to the public or doing good. It goes through a process. I think the Prime Minister then takes it to the King. It has to get approved. And so after your name, if you become a member of the MBE, after your name, you get MBE. But there's an order. So there's the MBE, there's CBE, there's OBE, and then there's knighthood. There's 4 within that tier. So, and then you can go up as well. So lately you would have seen likes of David Beckham just got knighted, but he was an MBE or OBE before. He's gone up. So it's like a tiered system.
Just your wife or you as well? MBE.
So my wife got it actually 18 months before me. And I used to joke that I used to curtsy my wife every morning that I saw her in breakfast. And then on the King's birthdays honours list in 2024, I got it for services to humanitarian, for the evacuations, for sport, and for mental health as well. And so I sort of said, "Oh, we're now on a level playing field." And she goes, "No, I've had mine longer." And so, but yeah, I know of couples that have it for the same reasons, maybe in the philanthropic space, but it's very rare that a husband and wife have it separately and come together. So I think it's nice.
I think one of the other MBAs we've had on here is the guy who invented the COVID drug at AstraZeneca, and got it for that. Yeah.
Yeah. You get people from all sorts, whether it's entertainment, music, arts, all walks of life. And the famous people, Elton John's and, Sir Michael Caine, all you get those that people know. And then there's the general public as well. I think it was born, I don't want to do it ill justice. I think it was born after the Second World War. I think King George was like, this is something that we want to give to public. And people recognize people doing good in society who may not be noticed. Yeah,
okay, so sorry for the tangent. I want to go back to,
no worries.
I've biked 20 miles. Now I'll try and set world record for doing 14,000.
Yeah, so we did a lot in the philanthropist way. I work a lot with veterans. And so when the Guinness came back, I said, well, we need to do it for a challenge. And so I'm going to name drop now. Prince Harry and I met each other in 2007 on a JTAC course, forward air controllers course. And we've been friends ever since. You know, he did a lot with me, being a guest on some of my veteran events. I had an intelligence fusion cell based in Mozambique and Tanzania, which would identify the smuggling routes of the ivory from Africa to Asia. So every 3 months I would go to the palace and sort of sit down with him and share this information. So we had a strong relationship behind the scenes. So I rang him up. I said, I'm going to cycle this, you know, what challenge should we do it for? And him and his brother and Kate were just about to launch a mental health campaign called Heads Together. And they had 11 non-profits who were going to be supported by everything from postnatal depression, young children, teenagers, adults, and veterans. So I was like, perfect. You know, I'd seen firsthand mental health within the military, but I wasn't aware about it for the whole of society. So we now had our campaign and we had our challenge. You know, the world record was 117 days. I trained for 15 months. We set a target of £1 million. Alana ran the whole sort of campaign around that and the fundraising. But our sponsored marketing team, I think I said, you know, did a SWOT analysis. And the only weakness was my arrogance to the cycling community, which I took as a strength. And, you know, how would this 40-year-old disabled veteran do this? And so I set off and I smashed the world record by 17 days, became the first man in history to do it under 100 days. And more impressively, Alana raised $1.4 million along the way. And that's actually how her book, I'm going to pitch her book. Yeah. How to Ask for Money. Yeah, she has a book called How to Ask for Money. So she actually,
she didn't tell when we were all on that other call, she didn't tell me about that book. That's an important book. I need that over at Child Rescue Association.
Yeah. Well, she raised $1.4 million for the nonprofit, but also prior to that, she got me £500,000 sponsorship that we could do this event. You know, as a non-cyclist, it was hard. You can imagine pitching to some of these blue chip companies, the board members, like, right, I've never cycled before. I'm going to cycle the world's longest road and break 2 records for mental health. A lot of them thought I had mental health problems myself. But the campaign that Harry, William and Kate had just launched on the London Marathon. So it was very much the topic of conversation at the time. And so it was really good timing when we were looking for sponsorship. So St. James's Place, which is a FTSE 100 wealth management company, they came on board and supported us. But yeah, Lana's book, she talks about how, you know, whether it's in non-profit or whether it's in business, you treat non-profit as business. She has her own sort of algorithms and how she managed to ask for money. It's all about mindset, preparation, and she's not shy in coming forward. So I actually did it so I wasn't smuggling people across borders. I never looked at a career beyond that. I didn't see TV opportunities, book opportunities. You know, I didn't even have a website. I literally only set up social media the week before I went on a bike ride myself. And so, but there's great stories in it. You know, I've just covered 99 days in about 30 seconds there. You know, some of the great takeaways I spoke to the previous record holders, and they all started in Alaska and finished in Argentina. But all their issues were in South and Central America, be it languages, spares for the bike, bureaucracy. So being a military guy, I was like, well, why would you not address those issues early, get them out of the way, and then at least then know you've got a clear path? And so one of the proudest things I turned it on its head and started in Argentina. But you can get a vehicle from Alaska to Argentina if you cross the Darien Gap. Coming up, we're having to swap vehicles in every country, so it was slowing me down. But from a cycling perspective, it was a good decision. I had a tailwind all the way through Peru. That's 2,500 miles of tailwind, which helped. So Alana, we had an RV and a 4x4, which was going to get shipped from Fort Lauderdale to Panama. And she rang me when I was in Ecuador, about 2 weeks out from the first world record. And she's like, oh, the vehicles haven't been loaded onto the shipping container. They're stuck in Florida. But she said, don't worry about it. I've got a plan. So she flew out with her PA, 2 of our friends, and they drove the vehicles 4,000 miles in 8 days from Fort Lauderdale through Mexico all the way to Panama. And I broke the world record in Cartagena for South America at 8 a.m, took the noon flight. I mean, Alana came in an hour later and gave me the keys. But where that's really important, everyone would have seen me on the bike. But I talk about the team behind you that people don't see. You know, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have done it in such a manner. And it's like the special forces. For every tier 1 operator, it takes 7 other people you don't see per 7-to-1 ratio. And so it's really about the importance of team. And then I get into North America on day 70, and I'm 14 days ahead of the world record. So I'm like, perfect. I can now take a rest. I feel like all my issues should be behind me, according to the other previous record holders. And I had 5 missed calls off Alana. I just got into Del Rio, into Texas, and I thought there's obviously something wrong with the kids because Alana's very good at keeping those distractions. So I called her and I said, is everything good? She said, yeah. She goes, what do you wear to a royal wedding? I said, what do you mean? She goes, what do you wear to a royal wedding? I said, I don't. And she goes, well, you need to think because we've been invited to Harry and Meghan's wedding. I said, that's nice. She goes, no, you don't understand. You're now a day behind. So going into the phone call, I was 14 days ahead. For me to get back in time for this wedding, I had to be now finished by day 102. So you can imagine the emotions I had as I was cycling off. I'd now just lost all my gains. I'm now behind target. And I get into Lubbock and we had 60-mile-an-hour winds and tornadoes. So I'm grounded for another 24 hours. I'm now 2 days behind. And there's a great app popular with sailors called Windy TV. And it gives you the strength and directions of winds every hour for the next 2 weeks. It's about 95% accurate. So that day that I was in the hotel, I was literally just planning my next route. I had to cycle 340 miles in the next 36 hours to miss the next weather window. But the luxury we had in the US that we didn't have in South and Central America is we had to be off the road at night down there. I had a support team and a documentary team, and they're a bit more risk averse than I am. So I had to, be off the road. We had the luxury of cycling in America at night. So the amount of highway patrol and stopping me at 2 or 3 in the morning, wondering what I was doing. But we played chess with Mother Nature. We had 17 days planned for the US. I did it in 11 and a half days. I also used it to my advantage. I got to Wyoming, picked up a great tailwind, 50-mile-an-hour tailwind, and I cycled 270 miles in 11 hours. So I was now, as I hit Canada, I was now well ahead of the world record, and I was now going to be able to make this royal wedding. And then the last bit, I was about a week outside in a town called Whitehorse, and I'm on social media.
Yukon.
I was eating 5. Yeah. I was eating 5 Big Mac meals, because I was burning 9,000 to 12,000 calories a day. So I was never putting weight on. I lost 25 pounds in total. So I was there on social media and a friend reached out and told me about this professional cyclist sponsored by Red Bull, already has 3 other endurance world records. This is his area of expertise. And he'd come out and announced that he was going to cycle it in August and be the first man to do it under 100 days. So every time I kept hitting my objective or getting to where I was, the objective kept moving. And so, I could have rested on my laurels and come in. But for me, I sort of sat and said, well, if I don't give it my 100%, will I live with myself? So I cycled for 22 hours 22 hours in the last 30 hours in minus 18 degrees snow. To get in 99 days, 12 hours and 56 minutes. So it wasn't the original plan. Anything faster than 117 days was the original plan. But I think where my background in the special forces and in the security situations, I think that really helped here in the fact that I had a plan, which is good, but I was able to have flex in it. I had to react to the situation changes as it happened on the ground. So that really helped me in this instance.
Yeah, it's incredible. So the book is relentless. Everybody should be going and buying their copies.
Yeah.
Well, and talk about that. Talk about how that turned into the TV shows and Netflix and these kind of things.
Yeah, so as I touched on, I didn't have any plans when I got back. A friend of mine, she took me in to meet a guy called Neil Blair. Neil Blair was the guy. So when J.K. Rowling came up with the concept of Harry Potter, she got turned down by 16 agents. Neil Blair worked for Warner Brothers. He was the guy who took her on. So I got introduced to him, sort of told him my story, and he said, yeah, there's a book. So I signed a book deal straight away, which is great. I didn't think I sort of joke. I had a ghostwriter, a good friend of mine. I got introduced to a guy called Jess, and he was a military guy as well. So he understood my language, because if it was up to me, me and my wife sort of joke. She's got 5 books. She's actually written her books. I had a ghostwriter. You know, I'd still be on chapter 1. But it's really good having a ghostwriter because I'm all about detail. And he's like, no one cares. He goes, let's keep this story flowing. And a lot of people are like, yeah, the book flowed really well. You know, it's like, okay, it makes sense. But he's written so many bestsellers. You know, have you heard of 75 Hard with Andy Frisella? And yeah, he wrote that with Andy as well. You know, so he's done a few good books. So yeah, I had the book, and then I started building up. You know, this became a mental health advocate, doing a lot of guest speaking, and yeah, I then got approached. I actually turned down a TV show back in 2015. I got approached about doing a show, a special forces show, and they said your name keeps coming up, and so for me, I had to sort of go through the process with the military, and then the military told me to step away from it, and so I stepped away from it. But a couple of my friends, one of my friends, Foxy, he had PTSD, so he couldn't work in the security industry, so he was struggling for work. And then there was another guy, Ant Middleton. He'd just come out of prison, and so he was strapped for work. And so I actually connected them with the production company, and they went on, and the show ended up being one of the biggest shows in 10 years in UK. And so, but for me at the time, it wasn't right because I was smuggling people across borders, and you know I was doing all these things, and also it was very new, the world of media, and it still was a bit of a taboo. Anyway, they went on to do a show in Australia. And when I came to the US, they said, oh, do you want to do the Australian show? So I did the Australian show. And then from that, actually, I lie. Harry and I did a promo video for my bike ride at Kensington Palace to really catapult this campaign and give it as much legs as possible. One of the girls who worked for that production company was now working for this production company who's doing this Netflix show. So they had a show called Inside World's Toughest Prisons, and they wanted to do a spin-off with the Special Forces. So she always remembered me from that interview and reached out. And so she reached out and, you know, said, would you want to do this show? And I said, oh, and one of the reasons I changed my mind is because my kids think I'm stolen valor. You know, they've all been born post-military. They don't actually believe I'm in the military, and they still haven't watched the show either, little monkeys. And so I thought it'd be good for them to see. And then, you know, at the age of 47, when we were filming it, I didn't think I was going to be doing stuff that I did 20 years previous. So the show is called Toughest Forces on Earth. And the best way to describe it, you heard of Top Gear. Yeah, it's like Top Gear with guns, but you couldn't call it Top Gun. And it's basically 3 middle-aged white men flying around the world, showcasing what's unique about these various special forces units around the world. And so there was me, there was a SEAL and a Ranger. And we do everything from the deserts in Jordan to the Arctic in Sweden. And we sort of talk about the environments that they operate in, their weapon systems that they use, you know, geographically where they're located. You know, like Jordan, you know, has a lot of hostile countries around it. But yeah, it was a great show actually, and good to sort of test my mettle as well at 47 years old.
Yeah, well, and talk about Chris Van Dusen and Slyko and what you're doing these days.
Yeah, so like I now work with Slyko Capital, a private investment firm, and people are like, "Wow, that's a big 90-degree turn," but it actually isn't. You know, I'd met Chris Van Dusen actually when I just come back from Israel doing the evacuations. He's part of a think tank group called ALDA, as is John, who's the CEO. And a friend of ours, Ben, he said, Dean, do you mind? We have a summit in Ojai in California. Can you and Alana come in and do a presentation? So we kicked off the 3-day summit with our presentation about who to help today. And that presentation talks about philanthropic endeavors, how on the global stage you can rescue people, you can break world records, but how every person can actually contribute to society. You don't have to do those grandeur things. You know, we can all do something. And so I met Chris there, and but I hadn't met John. But we ended up becoming part of that ALDA group. And they had an event last year in Montana. Went up to Big Sky, and he had the Tim Sheehy, the senator, the congressman, Ryan Zinke, ex-SEAL Team 6 commander there, and John Garcia, the CEO. He'd heard me on. I've done a couple of podcasts with Jocko, and he's a big fan of Jocko. And he's like, I've heard you on Jocko. I've read your bio, you and your wife, very impressive. You know, what is it you do? And I said, well, you know, I look after some of the biggest family offices in the world from a security aspect. And I guest speak around the world. He's like, well, you're in rooms that we want to be in. And I had looking, I've been with Alana 15 years, 16 years now. And it's like, we have been 1099s all the time. So it would be nice. Now we got our green card to like maybe settle down. And so John offered me an opportunity to come work with him. He said, well, you're already in rooms that we want to be in. People trust you. That's the big thing in this space. People need to trust you. And so, yeah, and actually there's no real difference. It's still a high performing team. There's still a lot of risk involved. And so, yeah, really settling in well. I think Chris Van Dusen did a brilliant one. It was like Tier 1 Special Forces, Netflix, Will Records, Silico Capital. It was like one's like glaringly jumping out, but that isn't the case at all. And the longer that I'm in this space, I see where I fit perfectly. With my network that's global as well, being able to help originalization and capitalization with my network, but then also power broke for the portfolio companies. One of our portfolio companies last week, I managed to get an introduction into the White House. Yesterday, I've spoken to Harley Davidson, who they're going to introduce me to MotoGP. So this is like a hydration system for motorsport. So outside of that, I have a good network and it's working well. But yeah, at the age of 48, I didn't think I was going to be learning this whole new industry. And the irony is, when I met my wife, she was a bank manager. She worked in finance. And I was obviously in security. Now we've done a 180. She's now in security and runs this OSINT security, which is killing it. And I'm now in finance. So, but yeah, I can see where John's vision was, and it works really well. And with our office that we've just launched in Mayfair in London, I have a lot of networks in the Middle East, in Far East as well. So yeah, it works well.
Yeah. Well, I want to give a little shout out to your wife. 16 years that I've been running our charity, Child Rescue Association. Listeners of the show know our family story about my mother-in-law being a trafficking survivor, and breaking the cycle, so it didn't happen to my wife. And we've done a lot of different things, helped a lot of different folks, different areas. And after that movie Taken, it almost became cool to have a counter-trafficking charity, and all of a sudden now everybody had one. And so I get introduced to a lot of people because not as many people have had them for 16 years, right? And you can really tell, like, the people who they're good at maybe some of the promotional side, and but maybe they haven't really been deep in it. And I just want to like give a shout out to your family and to your wife, like just her mindset and the perspective she brings to it. No wonder that Blue Rose has done so much good, and that the foundation has done what it does, and she's been able to do what she's doing. And you guys together, there's like a deep humanity. And it didn't take long on that call for me to like understand, she really gets like the second and third order effects and the layers under the layers. And and this cause needs more people like her involved. So thank you for me.
Yeah. Well, I think I say she's been in space 25 years in human trafficking, but for us, we talk about the Taken effect. Everyone likes that. We use the analogy of like oil and gas. You have upstream, you have midstream, and you have downstream. And that's the downstream one, the rescuing. But where Alana's focus is, so when she got her MBE, she's like, there's so many nonprofits out there. I mean, we like to help nonprofits, but some are doing really well, some are having impact, and some maybe not. And so the last thing she wanted to do was set up another one, but she did. I mean, when she did, everyone was like, we've been waiting for this. But she's more the upstream. Hers is more on the education. If we can educate and people learn anti-grooming, how to be safe online, then you take away the Taken effect down the downstream. So the IOM, the International Organization of Migration, have just partnered with Alana. They're now doing a new concept to educate 300 million girls by 2030. So yes, it's as you say, she's an expert in the space.
Well, from an investment standpoint, it's so profitable. We've had, again, a lot of number of tier 1 guys on here over the years, and they say things like, a pint of sweat in peacetime saves a gallon of blood in wartime, and that whole idea of like an ounce of prevention or a pound of cure. I mean, like, let's leave out the humanitarian side for a second. From a financial perspective, preventing trafficking, the cost to prevent trafficking, instead of to try to find it, stop it, help get the kid out, and then the years of therapy and all the work that it takes for the years and let's be honest, decades of healing. From a financial standpoint, it is such an incredible investment to invest into prevention and like the things that your family is doing. And then you take the humanitarian side. I mean, like, it's not even a question of how this not happened in the first place versus trying to help a kid after horrible abuse, you know?
Yeah. Like I said, when I met Alana, I wasn't aware about anything about human trafficking at all. And I think, you know, when I met, I knew she wanted to help people. And that's how she ended up training to be a bodyguard as well. That's how we ended up setting up the security company. She wanted to, one of her friends, when the Haiti earthquake happened, one of her friends was out there. As you know, they prey on natural disasters as well. They come into those areas and find kids. And her friend was out in Haiti, and I think there was something like as low as a $5 bounty on her head, this woman. And so she needed security. But security companies weren't willing to offer pro bono, you know, with the risk. And so Alana's like, I want to be in a position where we can deploy our own teams at no cost. And so that's how we ended up getting into the security industry. Really. That's how this whole thing started evolving. But I knew straight away when I met her, she was different. You know, she wanted to help people. And I think she obviously thought with my skill sets, you know, this guy's going to be able to help me as well. But I think she talks about it anyway. When I first met her, I said, you know, what is it you always wanted to do? You always wanted to be a bank manager. And because Aberdeen's the oil and gas capital of Europe, very male centric. And she goes, no, I also always wanted to be a spy. And so on our second date, I was up there for a week. I walked into the bank and I had the joining instructions for MI6 with the phone number for one of the instructors who was a friend of mine. I said, well, here. And then she said from that moment on, she goes, yeah, this guy's gonna push me. But yeah, her knowledge in that space, she works a lot now on legal cases as well as the experts in courts because yeah, she's immersed in it. You know, I sort of joke with her, can we go out for dinner once without talking about human trafficking or rape or sexual assault? You know, but it won't. It will come. and so, but yeah, it's her passion, and her goal is to end human trafficking, which is a huge goal, huge mission objective. But she genuinely believes it is possible.
No, it's incredible. Well, you look at the UK being the world leader of, you know, where they got rid of slavery, and over in America, we followed a number of years later, and people like William Wilberforce. And it takes crazy people. I mean, you think about William Wilberforce. I mean, I think people in our day and age don't really understand just how critical slavery was to the UK economy. I mean, just it was like going to like tech. It's like going to the tech industry saying like, hey, listen, we're going to make tech illegal. Do you know there's a lot of money invested in that not happening, right? There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of everything invested in you not getting that done. Like them getting slavery made illegal when it wasn't this illegal thing. It was like the basis for huge portions of the economy. I mean, that is just such a Herculean task. There's nobody that was like, oh yeah, you could do that. But it takes those crazy people. You know, you look at the Gandhis, you look at these, I don't know. It's like cliche from that Steve Jobs commercial of Apple of like, the people crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do, you know?
Yeah. I mean, obviously we even live in a world now where we have more slaves than ever though, and even though it's illegal. And I think I did see last week that the Taliban now made slavery legal. Now it's actually legally in their...
Yeah, there's two sides of it. The depressing side is absolute number of humans. We have more in slavery than we've had in history. But the encouraging part about it is the percentage of humans. We have the lowest percentage of humans in slavery in history. So we are getting closer to zero as a percentage than we've ever been as a world. Right. And
just because of the population growth.
And so we just need more people like your wife helping us get closer to zero. Listen, I want to go back. I want to go back to some parts of the story.
Please.
Let's talk about selection. You know, I've had like a friend of mine, Mark Reading, on here, former SAS 22nd Regiment guy, and it's no joke. You know, like, look at this, like, you know, you talked about butts. I mean, Navy SEALs training is very well known across America and other places of, you know, 80% of people who are already physically qualified, 80% of them don't make it. And you look at you guys and 95% are making it. I mean, you know, arguably 400% harder if, you know, like if 4 times less people are passing, right? And I don't think a lot of Americans know, like, people have died in selection over in the UK.
Oh yeah.
And, like,
this
is
died in selection. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, ours is like the template. It's actually interesting talking about books. I'm just about to write another book. It's called the SF Blueprint. And it talks about how UKS Special Forces has had influence on every Special Forces unit in the world.
Oh,
yeah. And I only got it when I did the Netflix show. When I did the Netflix show, I was out in Malaysia with the GGK, and it was like home of the Green Berets, but not Green Berets, your Green Berets, our Green Berets from the Royal Marine Commandos. And they're like, yeah, 40 Commando Royal Marines, obviously because we have a lot of history. And then I'm out in Colombia with the Jungla, and I'm having my dinner, and I'm like looking at this little logo, and it's got like the lion with the crown and the unicorn. I was like, that's our Commonwealth, that's our embassy. And I said, yeah, you guys set us up in 1975. And so, yeah, our selection process, a lot of selection process are born out of ours, and they'll put their own little twist on it. But they, it's hard to say what's the hardest. I always being biased.
Sure,
ours is the hardest.
Sure. But my point is this: like in a world full of helicopter parenting and safety on top of safety on top of safety, and right, the idea that like a government program, you can die in the middle of a government program that's not even war. Like, you mean like that doesn't compute for a lot of civilians. So what I want to talk about is when it got really hard. When it got really hard, what did you tell yourself? What helped you get through selection when, let's face it, out of 200 of you, only 8 made it? Mm. What made you one of that 8?
I'll go back to the other one. We train for real. So for the day one on selection, we don't use blank ammunition. Everything is live firing. Because when you're firing live rounds through that, and you're in the jungle and you can't see the guy, you have to physically put your safety on. You have to be safe with your weapon. You have to physically look. If you have blank rounds, then you're not fully immersed in it. And so that's what we train for real. And as the guy said, a pint of sweat is like saving a gallon. And we rehearse. We put ourselves in the hardest situations and the most dangerous situations. So should we encounter that on the ground, it's someone we've encountered before. Or if it's easier than that, then even better. So that's why we have deaths. Guys get shot, and then there's diving incidents. It just because of the nature of the job, there's going to be deaths. But for me, for selection, so for me, I actually didn't even want to join the army. I wanted to be a fireman as a young boy. I had no aspirations of being in the military myself. My father found me working in a surf shop in Newquay. So Americans don't realize that UK is part of the World Surf League Tour, and Newquay is part of the stop after Hossegor and Biarritz in France. And I love the water, hence why I went SBS and not SAS in the army. And I always wanted to be a fireman, and my father found me working in a surf shop. And he is the Ted Lasso of the army. He was the army soccer manager, player, and coach. So I knew about the military. I lived in the military, but just didn't want to do it. And he's driving me home. He's like, what are you going to do with your life? You've wasted your education. And I said, I'll join the military. And he told me I'd last 2 minutes. And, that was it. I didn't argue with him. And there's been plenty of times in my life from then on when people will challenge you. And I always say, people will have their own opinions and they can argue their point. And you can argue it till you're blue in your face, but you're not going to convince that other person. The best course of action was action itself. And so I went into the careers office and I joined the army. And my father then got fully behind me. He's like, all right, he's actually being serious, And so for me, I was going to do 3 years. I'll join the Royal Engineers, get what I can. And then next thing I was in the Commandos, the Airbornes, reconnaissance. And then my career was naturally funded me one way. Everyone I worked with was now going Tier 1 Special Forces. So for me, it was like, how do I become the best that I can be? When I joined, I was 140 pounds and 5'7". So I could see where my father thought I would last 2 minutes, but I never had any aspirations of being in the Special Forces. I just looked at the course I was on, got to the end of that, and I was in like the top 25%, and then I'm in the top 10%, and I'm in the 5%. But physically, I was getting stronger. I went from 140 to 200 pounds in 18 months, but mentally, I was getting stronger as well. And so I started believing in myself. And I think as well, when I went on selection, a lot of these guys I was on selection with, they wanted to be in the SAS or SBS since the age of 6 and 7. This is what they've always wanted to do. And then some of them may be doing it because their brothers or their fathers are in it as well. It felt a bit of peer pressure. I had no real pressure. I was like, well, let's try it. And some of these guys failed in that. And honestly, I'd never seen anything like it. For them, it's like their whole life built up to that and they'd failed. So they put them, that self-induced pressure. And so for me, it's like, I'll get as far as I can. And so I didn't really overthink it. But, I tell people as well, selection, 6 months and then the other 3 months. But on day one, you're not looking about getting your berry and belt on the 6 months. You're looking at, what do I need to do today to be here tomorrow? We call it the 1 yard. Just look at the 1 yard in front of you. Don't look at, same with the bike ride. I did exactly the same on the bike ride. 14,000 miles would consume you. I wouldn't get on the flight. But what I did is I broke it down into manageable bite sizes, broke it into countries, into days, broke it into four 2-hour rides. So for me, I was just doing four training rides a day, and then you start chipping it off. And so that's how I sort of did it. I mean, it's hard when you see guys leaving, but it also gives you a little boost. So that I must be doing something right as well. But you also have to believe in your own capacity as well. The instructors, there are points where the instructors will tell you you're no good and just save the pain, leave it now. But an amazing bit of advice, the chief instructor, I heard him say it on day one, and I took it. He goes, don't fail yourself, let us fail you. So until you hear it from them, you're still on that course. And so I was like, yeah, I get that. And then the numbers start dwindling. And but everyone thinks tier 1 special forces that you need to be like doing triple backwards somersaults and hitting a target with throw-in stars. It's none of that at all. Actually, selection for us is basic soldiering done well. We do nothing else. We do absolute basic soldiering, because the basic soldiering over the years, everyone's taken shortcuts and made it hard. It's actually very difficult. And in the jungle is the hardest environment. So we have 6 weeks. We do a full 28-day exercise in Brunei in the jungle. And you're sleeping on the floor as well for the last 10 days. You're not in a hammock and things like that. You're on the ground floor with the rain, and it starts eating away at it. But it's all, as I say, 80% mental, 20% physical. If you can get through selection or get through the hills and uninjured, you're there. But the other selection process has proved that you're fit enough. It's now testing the mind.
So tell us about one of the times in selection that was the hardest, or you were the most tempted to get discouraged or thought about quitting or anything like that. Tell us about like one of the tough times, if you can remember any, or maybe you can't.
I mean, the toughest time for me was the duration of the course, because once we come back from the trees in the jungle, which is about the halfway point, that's the only time they cull. They will then make a decision who stays and goes and who carries on with the course. So unless you really mess up, there's been guys actually who scared of heights, so they're not jumping, so they leave. And so for me was just the duration of the course, staying, because the unrelenting pursuit of excellence is the ethos of special forces. You have to be on point all the time. Yeah, you can do it, one day. It's like, for example, someone doing an Ironman, they have to be on point that day. They take the next day off. It's like my bike ride. I had to be on point for 99 days. It's keeping that momentum going and keeping that alertness. So that was the hardest thing for me. I never really had any. There's not pointing out I was going to say I'm off this course. There was none of that for me. That was the hardest thing. Then also another one was that the SAS guys, they were, because we were on their camp, as we're getting towards the end, they're being told what squadron they're going to. They're already getting their kit from the armory and all their weapons, and then they're off to wherever they're going around the world. And we're sort of like that, knowing that we've got 3 more months left doing diving and boating. And it's going to be, that was probably hard. It was just that whole duration of it. And sorry, actually the hardest thing as well, because when you finish it, you're like, amazing. You've now entered this unique club that the 0.001% will ever get in. And then when you go up to your unit, you're basically the new boy again. You're getting the kettle on. It doesn't matter. And that really was like, but it was grounding, actually. I was like, okay, I get it. You know what I mean? For them, it's like, okay, you're in the team. You're the new boy. I was like, okay. But yeah, it was good.
So when it was wearing on you, what are you telling yourself? What's your mental framework? How do you reinvigorate your mental toughness? What's that like for you?
I think whether it was on selection, whether it was on the bike ride, whether it was on the security stuff for me, humor is always a good one in the military. It's one of our ethoses in special forces, humor. Don't take things too seriously. So the guys have very good dark humor, so you can lean on your friends on that. But personally, you sort of look back at what you've been. A lot of the guys come from not so great backgrounds. I was in a homeless home in Moss Side in Manchester as a young boy. It was the most dangerous place. So I've been in hard times. And so I always say you can't be experienced without experiences. what are the lessons you learned from those experiences? It might not be the same scenario you're in, but it might be the same things you're thinking. And what are the takeaway points from that? And someone said to me, what's the worst to do? They can't make you pregnant. That's one of my instructors said that. I was like, okay, I'll take that. So I think everyone analyzes things slightly different. There may also be third party influence. A lot of guys, I remember a guy in our jungle, we get these blueies, these like letters. They're free post. It's like an envelope, a blue paper. You write on the inside, you fold it up, and it's Her Majesty's Forces. So it's free post anywhere in the world. But he was, and the chief instructor, I remember him saying, come on this course with everything sorted, all your welfare issues, and your wife and kids are happy, because you don't want to come on here with distractions. And there was a lot of distractions. Guys were getting letters from their wives like, oh, here you are playing soldiers, because they don't really know what it is. Here you are playing soldiers, and here's me left at home with the kids. And so that additional pressure. So the best thing to do, what I did is I was sort of and I didn't have a wife at the time, is just drown out that exterior noise and just focus on what you need to do.
Can you talk more about this, the 1 yard target, and just the very next thing?
Yeah, the one. So for us, it's easier said than done. When you're on a course like that, that you have these hurdles, and you're going to be, you've got endurance, you've got the fan dance, these big long marches, you've got your IA day in the jungle, which is gruesome, a whole day of just live firing and for the whole day. And then you have an evacuation thing, 12 hours of just getting shot at. And so they're coming, but don't overthink things. I just say, don't overthink, just try and just focus on what do I need to do now? How can I be present in this moment? How can I be present for my team? How can I be present to myself and be reflective for the instructors? Because your mind does your mind drifts everywhere and it plays tricks. Your mind is your best friend, and it's also your worst enemy. And it's just managing to control that. When I did my bike ride, I know there's hundreds of people out there who could probably cycle it faster, but can they deal with boredom? Can they deal with boredom in their mind? That's the big thing. I'm a daydreamer. I enjoyed it on the bike. I was just daydreaming. But it's just controlling that, because your mind is, as I said, will play tricks on you. And just control your mind and just try and become present.
Yeah. Can we talk about that maybe in a life and death situation, sometime when you were downrange, whether it's a story from the book or not, one of those life and death situations, maybe give us a little preamble, and then I'd love to talk about, what's going on mentally in the middle of that.
Yeah, I think for us, when I was in the special forces, it was every time we went out the door, so we operate at night. Every time we did something, there was a chance that you wouldn't come back. But we never thought like that, because if you think like that, you would hesitate. We generally believe we had the best training in the world. We had the best caliber of guys. We were in the best position, and we never went on an objective and thought, "Oh, we might not succeed this." We always went on there like, "No, we will succeed," and not on an arrogant mindset in the fact that we've done the right training, we've done the right planning, we've given ourselves the best advantage. And you get yourself psyched up, you go do the task, you get back on a helicopter and fly back, and then it all sinks in. Then the adrenaline sinks in. But when you're on the ground, it's almost like muscle memory. You've rehearsed, and then you rehearse again. And so when it comes to the day race, there's no hesitation. It's just all muscle memory. And, we do lose guys. We actually lose more guys. We actually lose more guys in training than we do in operations. So for us, it's like, at least when we're on operations, we're at the start line. A lot of guys get injured or killed before that. And you're doing a job that you love. I only found this out recently. I didn't realize. I kept hearing about the SEALs, the vanilla SEALs down in San Diego being upset with the SEALs on the East Coast. And I'm like, well, if you're upset, why don't you just go do SEAL Team 6 selection? And they're like, oh, you can't just volunteer. You have to be selected to go on the course. And I was like, well, that's wrong. So for us, we're all volunteers. And so no one asked you to do that. You volunteered to do that. And so, and you're doing a job that you love. But I think, I think that the SEAL Team 6 model, they may be missing some great candidates.
Well, you can put in for Green Team, but
you can put in for Green Team.
You can put in for Green Team. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay, so let's go a little more linear. Can you tell us an actual downrange story from an operation, a specific one?
I have to be careful because we, unlike the Americans, we have the Official Secrecy Act. And
okay.
We can't. Yeah, we're sort of limited on a thing called EPAW. So
okay,
we're limited
on
what we can talk about. Yeah, I only could tell that one because it was in my book. So
okay,
yeah, I'll tell you one. I think no, a good one for me. You know, I missed my first Afghan tour because I was an instructor on the commando course, and so I missed that. You know, it was interesting back when 9/11 hit. You know, the guys were going out to Oman. Everyone wanted to rush to get out there. No one knew it was going to be a 20-year war. But when my time came round, it was with the SBS. And my first time on the ground with the SBS was the first ever operational jump. We parachuted into Afghanistan at night. And for me, that was the pinnacle of my career. I was on my first tour with the SBS, but we were doing something in history. You know, we'd written history, and we did the same. We did operational jumps on hostage rescues. We did a lot in a short period of time. A lot of our peers before us, before 9/11, you know, it wasn't strange for guys to have almost full careers and not really see any good action. And all of a sudden, we're doing operations that they would be waiting for every night. And so in a short period of time, you know, we were rescuing hostages in Somalia, we're diving on cartel boats in Colombia, we were in Afghan Iraq. You know, I was very fortunate that I joined at a height of time, the busiest time in US and UK Special Forces history was that period. And so, yeah, but that one for me, just standing at the tailgate at night, just jumping into the unknown was a good one for me.
Yeah. What about on the evacuations? Had you done enough pre-planning that you didn't run into any incidents, or did it get hairy?
Yeah. So, no. I've never had to use a weapon once on any of them, or even carry a weapon. You know, so I sort of joke that, you know, we talk about Jason Statham, you know, the biceps, the bullets and bombs. You know, when you say special forces, they see, you know, the Hollywood thing. They see that offensive action, the explosions and everything else. That's called the offensive action. That's 25% of what we do in Tier 1 Special Forces. And it's normally the last resort. 50% of what we do in the Special Forces is support and influence its hearts and minds. It's been embedded with locals, understanding the demographics, the politics, the tribal influences, and understanding actually what's happening on the ground and not what the media monster is telling you. So a good example, the Canadian embassy, when the week before the British embassy got shot at every checkpoint between Tripoli and Tunis, which was scaring the Canadians. They're like, well, what if we encounter the same thing? So myself and my fixer, Abu Bakr, we went out and we went to the checkpoints. We didn't speak to the guys with the guns. We sat with the tribal elders from the region. And they actually told us that the British actually just drove straight through. They didn't slow down and they didn't know who they were. And so that's why they got shot at. And so we explained to them, we were fully transparent. We told them who we were. We told them what our intentions were, when we were going to be doing it. And it was just showing them respect. It was just good communication, respect. And we sat down, shared bread. And actually, when we went through those towns, they escorted us through. So, you know, you can have the weapons and things like that, but then sometimes just being chatting to the people. And we also had to think out the box. So the Canadians, they had the diplomatic vehicles with the red plates, which meant it was diplomatic. No one could go in those vehicles, which is fine. But they had so much specialist equipment, radios, communications kit, which needed to come out as well. And like, well, where do we put it? And so the Tripoli port, they would ship fish every day to Tunis. And so we got a fish wagon, because I know the fish wagon wouldn't get stopped at the border because the guy knows them. And we literally put all their sensitive equipment, you know, God knows what's in there, in this fish wagon and pushed it through. So yeah, but if there was a scenario, we did have weapons available at safe houses. But, you know, for me, it's just having a good plan in place. And that's been successful for me.
You know, not too many Delta guys have come out of the water side of things. In fact, there's only two guys from the Special Boat Service. The SWCC, Special Warfare Combat Crewman. So one of them is a guy named Peter Donovan, who was the executive director of my charity, Child Rescue Association. And he switched from Navy over to Army, went to the unit. But he talks a lot about like how much of the job is about preventing violence rather than looking for it. And like, how being a preventer is like being like a full-time problem solver, and like how much more efficient it is to be a preventer and these kind of things. And anyways, you guys sound so similar.
No, it's true. Like I said, the offensive action is the worst case scenario that you have to use that, and we are good at that. But we're not big units. We sometimes be on the ground as 4-man team, 6-man team. We don't have the assets in them, so you don't want to be getting into a firefight, because you'll be massively outnumbered. So yeah, the prevention's always the best way. I hear about it with some of these security companies as well. We got into a firefight here and here, and I'm like, okay, some things are unavoidable. You will get into that, but then some of them is like, well, look at alternative. You always want to try and avoid trouble. As soon as it goes loud, then you've been compromised. So yeah, I agree completely with what Pete was saying.
I do think, I took martial arts all my life. Taekwondo as a little kid, competitive judo my teenage years, then a couple different kind of karates in college, and then jiu-jitsu and little Krav Maga. And I think about this with people getting in fights. And I think about like the guy says, well, I'm not going to throw the first punch. But like there's some guys who walk around hoping to get in a fight regularly to show how tough they are. Right?
Yeah.
And then there's those like really skilled guys that like, they just don't end up in fights. Like, should there be one, they know what to do. But there is like a whole mindset of the like, nobody's going to walk on me. You like, I don't know. There is definitely different mindsets of like, what are we here to do?
I tend to find those who are looking for fights trying to fill a void in their life, if that makes sense. Yeah, they're missing something in their life. A good example, in the UK back in the 80s and 90s, there's a lot of movies on it, is the football hooligans on the turfs, at the stadiums. But actually, when you look at a lot of them guys, a lot of the guys who were running them were white-collar guys who worked in finance and in banking in London. So their lives were boring and they're trying to fill it with someone else. So I tend to find that with those sort of people is, someone is trying to, who are you trying to prove to? Like a lot of the guys, probably my background and the guys that is like, we don't need to prove anything. We're comfortable. We've been in those scenarios before, but and we know how to walk away.
I remember a statement, U.S. special. When I took a couple of years out of finance and I was doing leadership training, the company I was with, I was in charge of their special operations command and intelligence agencies clients. And I brought a 25-year SEAL with me. We went to Nigeria and taught the Nigeria Special Operations Command when they were starting theirs up. It was this 10-day thing, kind of like, so it was me, an SF guy, a recon Marine, an American Islamic law scholar, which is interesting. And it was kind of like, here's the mistakes we made in Afghanistan and Iraq. Hopefully you don't make those same mistakes with Boko Haram. It wasn't that long after they'd kidnapped the 200 girls, right? And there's this recon Marine who was running it. And, recon Marines are not part of SOCOM in America. Like non-MARSOC guy. So he's an exceptional recon Marine that SOCOM has him running entire events for the TSOC, the Theater Special Operations Command General, the guy in charge of all of Africa, right? And he did say to me, like, he said he felt like it was a sad thing in military culture within like the special operations units, like the further you went up. He says the further you go down, it's like almost how many people you'd killed was how cool you were, was this thing. And the further you went up, there was like this inner confidence, and that wasn't a thing. And it was, and I mean, obviously that's a really graphic or tough thing, maybe especially for civilians to hear, but it really had an impact on me hearing about that. And it was like, I think about the tier one folks like yourself I've been able to learn from a bit. And what you just said, like, rings so true. It's almost like the Michael Jordan statement, like, people are always asking him, like, aren't you afraid? Aren't you, when are you scared? And he's like, well, I'm not scared. Like, I put in the hours. Like, I know what I can do and I know what I can't do. He's like, yeah, you're nervous. You're nervous. It's a game. You want to win. You don't have a crystal ball. But he's like, I wasn't scared because I knew what I could do and I knew what I couldn't. And it's like, anyways, I don't know if I'm tying those together very well, but I find you guys like that.
No, it makes sense. And a point you made there is not that we're not scared either. We all have fear. Anyone tells me that they're fearless, bullshit. We all have fear. It's how you manage that fear. That's the difference, and people manage it in different ways. But no, you're right. I do feel like, you'll never hear a British guide tell you how many people are killed. We just don't do it. And but when you do overhear people talking about, oh yeah, when you realize that, there's cracks in that, what I mean? Who's he trying to prove it to? And it tends to be their own insecurities. That's what I find with those types. And that's the great thing about the tier one guys is they don't need to prove it. They've all come from various backgrounds as well, and they've all done different operations and it's just a mutual respect. They've all gone through the same selection process to get there. And I think that's what the selection process is good. It doesn't matter what you've done before. You are all on par. And that's why the SAS and SBS is great, because we do the same course together, because sometimes we have to come together as units. So we all mutually have respect for those guys. We know that they've been through the same process.
Yeah. Another topic I'd love for you to talk about is, you think about this, like, time from homeless shelter, like being in the States, for Americans, like the projects, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And, we've got certain elements in this country who feel like, if you listen to the topic, it's almost like they have the attitude that that's like a life sentence. And like, you are living proof that regardless of where you've come from, take personal responsibility, willing to learn, pick yourself up, that incredible things are possible. I mean, what would you say about that, about the capacity for humans to invent their own future?
Yeah, no, I believe in that. Just from where you come from doesn't mean you have to end in that same position. I always say, I guess speak a lot for Manchester United Foundation for the kids there, because they all come from Moss Side and Fallowfield, where I was. My parents split up. My dad was in the military and she was from Manchester. So when we went up there with my two sisters, to get on the housing ladder, you had to declare yourself homeless. So I was the only Caucasian, me and my sister were the only Caucasian kids in the school. So you can imagine that in the mid 80s. But, for me, I always tell kids that you come to a T junction in life and you don't always have to go the same way as your friends, but some people do. That peer pressure, it's harder nowadays, even harder now with social media. But yeah, I do believe that just because where you come from doesn't mean that's where you end up. And Alana as well. Alana, humble beginnings as well, from an estate up in Northfield in Aberdeen. And so, yeah, she's an amazing person as well. So yeah, hopefully both live in proof of that. Anything's possible. Yeah.
When you think about a principle for people who are looking for a future that's 10x or 100x where they came from, what's one or two or three principles you feel like have served you in your life?
I think for me, one of the principles is that this humility and integrity is par and par together. I think one of the things that's really helped me, and Alana calls it my USP, is I will talk to you the same. I will talk to the King of England the same I would talk to a homeless boy in Somalia. There's no difference. I see people all as one. I don't see class. I don't see gender. I don't see religion. And actually, in my line of work, I have to remain impartial. I don't sway anywhere. And I have seen people from all walks of life. I've seen the good and the bad, but I treat all people the same. I have to admit, probably my biggest weakness is sometimes I'm quick to judge. I'll make an assessment, and I love being pleasantly surprised. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't see that, but that's me being really critical. But for me, that's helped me, is that treat all the same, regardless where they come. Some people will get starstruck with people or see people with money, and I see them change. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like a really good example, actually, one of this. Prince Harry and I did that promo video together at Kensington Palace. So Mark and his team, they had the cameras in the courtroom, in the courtyard, sorry. And yeah, I think we had 3 cameramen there and 2 staff or whatever, and the sound. And I was chatting to Mark, and then all of a sudden he just almost like strung to attention. I was like, what are you doing? He said, oh, Harry's it. He'd just come in the courtyard. I said, all right. but then what Harry did, which I thought was amazing, he went, before we did any filming, he went round and spoke to everyone on that team. Spoke to the cameraman, spoke to the sound girl, spoke to the thing, introduced himself, made them feel he didn't see them as any different from him. He was genuinely interested in what their job is on the thing. And I mean, I've noticed that's what I've done through, obviously I don't have stature as him, but that's quite powerful when people see that. that you treat them as an equal.
Yeah. I want to talk about those two words. I'm interested how you would define the word humility or what it means to you.
So again, it's one of our ethoses in the special forces is humility. I've done great things. Don't get me wrong, I've done great things as well, but so have other people. Don't assume that you're the only person who's done great things. Sometimes I've just been on a call a minute ago with a gentleman from a big yachting company just before this. And he's like, tell me your story. And I'm like, obviously my story, I have to do it in a chronological order. And sometimes I feel bad that I'm actually breaching that humility, but I have to tell the story so he gets the full picture. And again, assuming I was like, oh, this guy's in yachting, but this guy, he didn't tell me his story. I was like, wow, you know what I mean? And so I think humility is the fact that, again, going back to the equals, we all have a book in us. Everyone has a book in us, without a doubt. Some people just get opportunities where an agent will let you do it. But, so for me, humility is more about listening than talking.
Yeah, that's a pretty simple wrap up, but a pretty good one.
Yeah.
How about integrity? How do you define integrity, or what does that mean to you?
No, integrity to me is a big thing. Again, it's another ethos of the special forces. Integrity. If you can't trust the guy next to you, then especially in that line of work. It was really interesting when I got out of the military. I said to my wife, I said, "Oh, everyone looks after each other." She said, "Oh, the corporate world is a bit different from that." And so, Alana's been quite good for that. But integrity for me is, integrity and trust. You only get one chance. As soon as you lost that trust, it's hard to rebuild it. And so for me, I've always been true. If I can't do something, I'll tell him I can't do them. And I've never. That's one of the things that we say with me and Alana. We've our friendships that we have with people are still our friendships now. We've never really lost any friends because of that whole integrity. Because people can see through it. People sometimes want to take shortcuts, or and for me, it's like, yeah. For me, I see that early, and I don't like it, and so for me, it's one of the main attributes, I think, of an individual is that integrity.
Yeah, you talk about teammates. I would love to know. You don't have to name names, but I'd love to know, like, during your time in SBS, like, tell us about somebody you looked up to. Tell us about a teammate or a leader or somebody that you like that really, like, I don't know, embodied like the best of what that community has.
It was interesting. It was, throughout my career, I talk about instructors wise, you'll see, like, I ended up becoming an instructor on the commando course, and I was like a sponge in the military. I was seeing good instruction. I was seeing bad instruction. I was just taking the good things from all these leaders. And then obviously when I then became an instructor, I was like, I don't want to be like that person. My method of instruction is slightly different. And and where I go with that, I would never ask of a student that I wouldn't do myself. So if I told them to do 50 press ups, I'm not stood there with my arms folded. I'm down in the dirt with them. And there's a good example. But yeah, there's a few people, a guy called Chris Barron, Ozzy Osbourne, and they weren't in the special forces. They were at my time younger in my career in the commandos in the reconnaissance. And what I liked about them is you have to have authority in the military. Tam Miles is another good one as well. You have to have authority in the military. But then if you see something wrong, call it out. There's a lot of guys that are so focused on their career. They don't want to say something out of place or raise awareness because they don't want it to affect their confidential report. There's those who would say, no, this is wrong, and we'll challenge other people. And I like that. I ended up being a military ski instructor, and our officer commanding, who was the new OC, I took him on his commando course. I also took him on his military ski instructor course and his novice course, and I failed him. And the instructors were like, you can't do that as the OC. I said, why not? He hasn't met the grade. And, it didn't stop me. But I just think a lot of people, because they're climbing on top of each other to get promoted, sort of forget their vows. For me, it was always about looking after the team, my team. I didn't really, and if anything was said or done to damage that, then I would stand up for it, whereas other guys probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I was a rebel.
Well, listen, appreciate making time. It's been fun to get to know each other. Looking forward to doing more stuff together. Thanks for making time for this.
Jess, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.